Today's meeting at the White House between the President of Ukraine, a European delegation, and United States President Donald Trump will set the future direction of talks with Russia and may pave the way for a peace agreement. Washington, acting as mediator, will present the offer made by the Russians during the meeting in Alaska. It is known that territorial concessions by both sides are involved, but security guarantees, which are of the utmost importance to Ukraine, are also on the table. Vladimir Zelensky's official meeting in the United States could significantly influence the history of Ukraine.
Mr. President, thank you very much.
At the same time, it is a conversation with one of Zelensky's closest associates in the United States administration, who has flown to Kiev many times as a special envoy.
I've got a meeting.
At the other end of the spectrum is another advisor to the United States President, Steve Witkoff, who has been responsible for relations with the Kremlin in recent months. It was he who dropped a bombshell about security guarantees just before the visit of the Ukrainian president and the European delegation to Washington.
The United States is potentially prepared to be able to give Article 5 security guarantees, but not from NATO, directly from the United States and other European countries. That is big. I mean, really big.
For Kiev, this is one of the most important elements of the security architecture in the peace negotiations. Zelensky wants Washington not only to mediate the talks, but also to guarantee future peace for Ukraine.
It's an honor to have the president with us.
Will they be involved? Will there be soldiers on the ground, as in some countries? Do we have the opportunity to obtain a modern number of air defense systems? These are just questions for now. We really want to get an answer to understand what the security guarantees are. What you are talking about seems to me to be a signal to the other side that they will not continue to occupy us. But, to be honest, so far these are just words, and at the level of a trilateral meeting, we are ready to talk. As for the White House, I am determined to be very productive in a good sense, in every sense of the word. Expectations are high, especially since even now, in the face of a potential end to the war, Putin brutally reminds us what this diplomatic game is all about. 5 people were killed and at least 20 were wounded in recent airstrikes on Kharkiv. On the other hand, as both analysts and politicians emphasize, there is no other way than diplomacy. The most important thing today is the terms of the negotiations and ultimately the peace agreement.
This war in Ukraine has been going on a really long time now, 3+ years. Hugely impacted Ukrainians who've suffered hugely, but it's also impacted Europe, it's impacted every single family and community in the United Kingdom. And so everybody wants it to end. Not least the Ukrainians, but we've got to get this right. We've got to make sure there is peace, that it is lasting peace, and that it is fair and that it is just.
Stop killing civilians!
Since the beginning of his presidency, Donald Trump has emphasized the need to end the war. The meeting in Alaska, widely reported in the media around the world, is assessed by most in terms of what the United States did and did not gain. However, there are those who see the risk that the American president has taken. He risked his political capital to put his ego aside to meet with one of the most disliked and toxic political figures of our time, with one goal in mind: to save lives and stop the war. As a Ukrainian veteran, I appreciate the president's courage and efforts to bring about lasting peace. The condition, at least according to US media reports, was to be territorial concessions. Ukraine would have to cede the entire territory of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions to Russia. For now, however, as politicians involved in consultations ahead of the White House meeting emphasized, this is out of the question. There is one point that President Trump rightly noted. Russia seems to be prepared to negotiate along the so-called line of contact rather than along administrative borders. This is a huge difference because Russia claims rights to territories that have not been militarily occupied by Russia. This was, of course, the subject of discussions during the night, and according to President Trump, Putin agreed to negotiate along the current front line. Kiev has so far strongly rejected the possibility of territorial concessions for peace. This may change in the face of direct American involvement in security guarantees for Ukraine and significant military support for the Ukrainian army. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk is once again being sidelined by world leaders. There is no place for him at the negotiating table in the White House. The German Chancellor, the French President, the British Prime Minister and the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, will all be there. Donald Trump recognizes that Donald Tusk's government is not an autonomous government. that it is a satellite of Germany, so separate talks with Donald Tusk make no sense. Almost the entire so-called coalition of the willing, a group led by left-wing establishment politicians from Western Europe, flew to Washington, D.C. Donald Tusk also lined up for a meeting with Donald Trump, but, as in the case of his recent visit to Ukraine, things turned out even worse. There, he ended up in the second carriage, and now he wasn't even invited. Instead of being in the first carriage, setting the tone, the narrative and pursuing Poland's raison d'etat, Donald Tusk is being pushed into the second carriage and is the lackey of Emmanuel Macron, Friedrich Merz and Ursula von der Leyen. This is very dangerous for Poland, although he assured his voters, I want to tell you that no one will really outplay me in the European Union. He was indeed right that no one will outplay him because no one plays with him, no one takes him seriously. I think he's the kind of person who passes balls or hands out jackets, and that is probably where his role ends. And when he has the opportunity to exchange a few words with the American leader, then, during this conversation, you exchange words with one another? No. You didn't say anything to Donald Trump? We introduced ourselves. No wonder then that before Donald Trump's meeting with Vladimir Putin in Alaska, when Trump called European leaders, he decided to skip the conversation with Prime Minister Tusk, and the Polish president participated in the conference instead. Because for Donald Trump, President Karol Nawrocki is a serious partner for security talks, and today, for obvious reasons, he did not appear in Washington, D.C. Today, a coalition of willing countries is meeting. Poland has been represented in this coalition by the Polish government for a long time, and it was President Zelensky who invited the European leaders who are to be in Washington today. And the President of Poland is the only leader in Europe today who in the near future, on the 3rd of September, will meet President Donald Trump, during which security issues and peace in Ukraine will be among the most important topics. I would like to inform you that the discussion on participation in the joint visit of the so-called Coalition of the Willing to the United States with Volodymyr Zelensky took place with the participation of Minister Radosław Sikorski. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland did not express Poland's readiness to participate in this visit. The President of Poland is planning a visit to the United States on the 3rd of September. President Karol Nawrocki will present Poland's raison d'etat to Donald Trump during a private conversation. If he flew today, he would be one of many and still in a coalition formed de facto by Germany. What is the coalition of the willing? It is a coalition of those willing to send troops to Ukraine, and we have not signed up to this coalition. The government probably wanted to, but there was so much public resistance that they didn't really want to. The Polish president certainly does not agree to this. President Nawrocki, during the election campaign, but also after the election campaign, as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, clearly stated that he would not agree to Polish soldiers being sent to war in Ukraine. There was no place for Donald Tusk, and for good reason. He earned the American leader's disregard. Notorious, numerous, repeated taunts, mockery and the ridicule of Donald Trump expressed by Donald Tusk and Radosław Sikorski. This only emphasizes that they had to pay for it, that these are people who are not mature enough for the positions they hold. With such gestures and words, Donald Tusk has exposed himself. Trump's dependence on the Russian services is today undeniable. It is difficult for the President of the United States, the world's greatest superpower, to take such a person seriously. Why should he talk to a servant when he can talk to the servant's boss? In politics, words and gestures are of great importance, as Donald Tusk has once again found out.
Hundreds of Air Canada planes did not take off from airports in Ottawa, Montreal, and Vancouver after flight attendants who have been on strike since Saturday rejected an order to return to work immediately and called on the airline to return to the negotiating table.
Flight attendants who operate their aircraft are the heart, soul, and face of their operations. We want to thank those of you that have come out to support today physically and continue to utilize your media platforms to share this incredible failure of the Canadian government. It is truly a tragic injustice to us all.
On Saturday, Prime Minister Mark Carney's government took action to end the strike, asking the Canadian Industrial Relations Board to take immediate action on the matter. Flight attendants who are members of trade unions have expressed their opposition, arguing that such a regulation is unconstitutional.
Well, I have a message for the Prime Minister. This is bigger than CUPE. This is bigger than Unifor. You've picked a fight with all the workers in Canada. We're not going to put up with it, and we're going to rise and we're going to fight back. We are one of the largest unions in the federal sector, and this basically means the government is taking away the right to strike, and we're simply not going to accept it, not now, not ever, and not in the future either.
Air Canada cabin crew protested outside Vancouver Airport, among other places. The government now has a plan B to end the strike. It intends to ask the court to enforce a return-to-work order. Passengers must be patient.
We've been trying to get through on the phone to Air Canada to try and rebook our flights, been looking online, there's nothing available, we can't get through on the phone. And so I just decided to come down here to the airport to see if I could talk to an agent and get something booked.
I'm trying to get back home to London. Hopefully I'm going to get back, but we'll see, I guess. But what can you do? It's just bad timing, bad luck. So just got to get on with it.
It's so uncertain. I don't know when. My flight was supposed to be at 2:35, and on the board it says the flight is delayed to 3:35. But unfortunately, the agents of Air Canada say they are not certain if we are going to leave. And so I don't know what to do. I'm just confused.
The most controversial point of contention in the months-long negotiations is the union's demand for compensation for time spent on the ground between flights and helping passengers board. Flight attendants are only paid when the plane is in motion.
We are going to continue forward, and with the public's backing, go on without faltering. Air Canada, let me be clear, you are just that, a representation of Canada and its citizens, and step up to the plate and deal with this before it goes on for too long, and the public, let me be clear, is behind us.
Air Canada cabin crew went on strike for the first time since 1985. Canada's largest carrier has been forced to cancel hundreds of flights. The disruption could affect more than 100,000 passengers worldwide, including in Poland.